You're listening to episode 109, Evolving from a Traumatic Past into a Beautiful Life Today with Annie Kim. Welcome to the Grass Gets Greener podcast, the show for survivors by survivors. I'm your host, Melissa Wilson, a bullying survivor and anti-bullying advocate. And each week you'll hear from a survivor who has overcome a traumatic experience to go on to not only survive, but thrive, so that you can too, starting now. Hey guys, welcome and thanks for joining me for this latest episode. I hope you enjoyed the update episode last time with Emily Stroya. Today I'm going to be joined by a new guest. Her name is Annie Kim, and she's the author of A Beautiful Evolution, Overcoming Adversity Through Art, which chronicles her journey from growing up in an abusive and controlling environment to being free and having created a beautiful life for herself today. Annie and I actually know some people in common, so I'm glad that we got to connect and to be able to have her on the show to share her inspiring story, which is just filled with lots of hope. What I love is that Annie just has such a positive outlook for life, and she comes from a background where there was a lot of trauma and a lot of tragedy, so it's great to see how she's doing today. One of the things that happened for Annie was that she had blocked a lot of the memories of abuse that she experienced as a child, and she's going to talk about how developing postpartum depression triggered these repressed memories and why she thinks that happened. And she's also going to talk about how her book came to be because it wasn't something she had necessarily planned on. And we're going to talk about how you never know what someone has been through in their life. And Annie will talk about how she wanted to allow herself to feel the emotions from her past so that she can move on. And we'll talk about the importance of taking time for yourself to recharge. And Annie is also going to share a crazy story of how she met someone who wrote a fiction book that eerily resembles her story, and this was before they knew each other. And what's funny too is that I've actually met this person who wrote this book, but it's just one of those experiences that you can't explain, so Annie will tell us about that. And like I said, I think Annie's story is inspiring and filled with hope, and I hope that you'll be able to take something away from it to help you in your situation. So without further ado, we're going to get into this one, and I'll go bring Annie on. Annie, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me here today to share your story with us.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came across you and your story through your book launch. You recently released a book called A Beautiful Evolution, Overcoming Adversity Through Art, and that was published by Jesse Krieger and his company, Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. And Jesse is someone who I follow, and when I heard about your book, I became interested in your story. And what I found out is that you come from an abuse background, and you've really just been through a lot of tough times in your life, but you've been able to overcome those adversities through your art, like your book title says, and you've been able to create a new life for yourself today.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have you on the show to share that journey with us and provide hope and inspiration for those who are still deeply affected by their past and aren't sure that things can get better. And what I'd like to do, Annie, is start with your story of all the traumatic experiences you've had so that we know where you're coming from, and then we'll go from there. But I know for you that you had repressed the memories of these experiences, so I want to start by having you tell us when you first started to remember and what it was that you started remembering.
Okay. Yes. So, about, I would say 4 years ago, I have two sons who are now almost 6 and 4-year-old. And after I had my last son, Davis, I went through some pretty bad postpartum. And I had emergency C-sections with both of them. So it was really hard on my body. And his pregnancy was extremely hard. I was pretty sick the entire time. I was throwing up every single day. I had trouble eating. Just wasn't health-wise doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I gave birth to him, I got pretty depressed. And I definitely think it was postpartum. And then also just taking care of a toddler and having a newborn baby, it was just very difficult. And I was at one point not really sleeping that much. And I kept having these nightmares when I would sleep of my childhood. A lot of these flashbacks from being, you know, 5, 6 years old and having these feelings of fear.
Wow.
And
It's interesting how they were triggered for you through the
absolutely, I think
postpartum.
definitely,
Yeah.
yes. And I just think the birth of my children, just naturally when you become a mother, it's just you connect so much more with having compassion and really, connecting with your childhood and, trying to think about what type of parent that you want to be to your children.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, like starting to raise these two little boys, were growing up, I started really thinking about my childhood and it brought up all this stuff that I had completely kind of shoved away
Mm.
and that I hadn't dealt with in, almost 30 years. And all of it pretty much came immediately flooding back.
Wow.
Like I said, I wasn't sleeping. I probably got to like 90 pounds. I wasn't eating. I was just almost manic. But I was constantly doing something. It wasn't like I was just awake and not doing anything. I was either painting or writing or taking care of my kids and just working. And I was just overwhelmed. I was almost keeping myself busy so that I wouldn't really have a lot of time to actually kind of think about what was going on
Mm-hmm.
because I knew something wasn't right. I didn't feel quite right and I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
And when I was 17, I had a suicide attempt. And so I know what it feels like to be depressed. And it wasn't like necessarily a depression feeling I was feeling though. So I wasn't sure what it was. And so I decided to get some help. And I checked into a healthcare clinic in Henderson, Nevada. And it was amazing. I was there for 5 days and it was the best, 24-hour care of just like therapy and just being able to actually interact with other people who, were just like me, were parents who are good people, but were just had stuff in their past that they maybe couldn't overcome or stuff in their present that was just overwhelming and needed a little time out and just needed some help. And it was comforting to know that almost that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was an amazing experience. And it helped me get back into doing art and, having a therapist and being able to talk to them about, my past stuff that was coming up and how I was able to deal with it in a positive way. And then also to how when, I get back to my, actual life, how I can deal with things better, how I can, be able to manage them in a more positive, healthy way for myself, and then to be able to benefit my kids. And that ultimately was the most important thing is I want to be the best parent I could be, but I really needed to figure out like, what was all the stuff coming up?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, for me to be a good mother, when my kids get older, and they ask where I came from and all this stuff, I want to be able to know and to be honest and to have these conversations.
Yeah. So when you had the suicide attempt at 17 and you were feeling depressed, did you know where that was coming from?
Absolutely. And I come from a family of a lot of depression, a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of physical abuse, and a lot of suicide attempts. Actually, my great grandfather actually starved himself to death. My uncle shot himself. I mean, I come from a long history of it, so
There's a
I've
lot of
always been aware of
tragedy.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I've always been aware of it. My sister has been was diagnosed, bipolar when we were children, and I mean, I was never, but diagnosed anything, but I always, I grew up. My parents owned a ceramics store, so I grew up painting all my life. And at one point, I was homeschooled, and I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I came from a really strict household, and it was really hard, and I wasn't able to be social with anybody, so I would literally paint all day long. And so that was my therapy growing up. And at 17, I mean, I graduated high school at 15. I was in college. I had two jobs. And at 17, I just was miserable. I didn't want to live in a place anymore. And this is in Seattle, where I was born and raised. Like being pushed into a religion that I didn't believe in. And, having to be somebody that I didn't want to be, but I
Mm-hmm.
felt pressured to be.
Mm-hmm.
So at 17, my older sister lived in Las Vegas. She had ran away there like 2 years prior, and she wanted me to come out here to live with her. And that's where I currently live now since 2000. And And so, I wanted to, so I did. And my parents didn't want me to leave. And, you know, basically I was like, if I can't leave, I mean, I didn't know what else to do. I was just so unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So I mixed probably like 40 different pills together, and I just took them all right before I went to bed. And, I remember like praying and just being ready to go, just because I was like, I know that this is a horrible thing to do. And that, I prayed to the universe or whatever there is out there that, this is not the way I want my life to be, but I just can't live like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so unhappy, and I literally was caged up. I mean, I wasn't allowed to do anything or go anywhere and except my job, and wasn't allowed to interact with anybody who wasn't part of my religious group. It was really hard.
Yeah, that's hard when it's such a controlling situation.
Absolutely. And mentally, and, and then, as a child, I was physically, sexually abused by my step grandfather for a few years. And, that went on until I was 6. And so it's like it was just, I just felt like I was surrounded by so much negativity and abuse, and I had to get away. So
Mm-hmm.
after I did that, I took those pills at night. I woke up in the morning, and I was just fine. Nothing, like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sick. I didn't throw up, nothing. And I
Oh.
was, I couldn't believe it. And, I ended up telling my mom what I had done. And I was like, and she was just still, really adamant about me not leaving. I was only 17. She didn't really want me to move out of state. But, I told her, I'm like, I know I can't live here anymore. And I'm going to eventually probably I will try to kill myself again if you don't let me leave. I have to. I just can't be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I just ended up leaving a few months later. And I've been here ever since I was 17 in Las Vegas. And, and I love it. It was a good change. I mean, and after that was my one and only attempt. And I don't think it was because of me being, somebody who's, had bipolar, or because I had long-term manic episodes or anything like that. It was the place that I was in, and the situation I was in was really, really hard to deal with. And, as a teenager, I just didn't know where to go, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it either.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
it makes
really,
it
I felt
even.
very, very alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of that's just a recipe for being depressed and
Absolutely.
suicidal. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to understand. So at 17, were you aware at that point of the abuse that you had gone through when you were younger? Or had
I
you
mean,
repressed those memories at that time?
I think, I've always known, I've always felt something, but definitely the memories are repressed. Because I remember a really very vivid memory, and so does my sister. We've actually talked about it a couple of times, where I was probably 6 or 7, and I just remember being in so much pain, in my lower abdomen and my crotch area as a kid, and just bleeding, and just showing my sister and telling her and just crying, but I can't remember anything before that.
Mm.
And luckily, I mean, but I have some scars on my body. So from that, I know that something has happened, but I think, still my memory won't allow me to really go there, which, I'm fine with.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's certain things that, you don't really need to have detailed confirmation of to know that it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then at one point, you just started having these memories come back to you.
Yes. Like I said, yeah. So just, I would say, my son was born in 2013 in May, and I think about October, November is where, that's when I finally went into the healthcare facility, and then was getting therapy, and it was great. And it literally, that from that point on, my life completely changed. That's actually when I started just journaling for this book. I wasn't planning on writing a book. I was just journaling, a recommendation of my therapist, to just let the stuff out, like memories you have, nightmares you have, just like write it out, let it out. And then, you used to love painting. Like for the first 17 years of my life, I painted every day. And then as soon as I ran away, I stopped. And so at this point, I was 30 years old when I had my son. And I was like, well, I haven't painted in 13 years. And I started doing it again. And then I couldn't stop.
Mm-hmm.
It really was like the most amazing outlet for me, and still is, just for anything. And just to be able to be creative and create something, an expression of something you felt at a time and point in your life is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, what was your life like, between 17 and 30? Like, were you struggling during that time, or were you doing pretty well?
No, I actually was doing pretty well. I mean, I was, I think because I was homeschooled and I was so into art and stuff like that, I like really enjoyed working because it was like social for me because I was kind of not that social growing up. So when I moved out here to Las Vegas, I actually started working like with Neiman Marcus, and I had these amazing jobs, and I just kind of lucked out on stuff. I went to massage school. I started working with a doctor on patients, and then I started working at the Paris Hotel and at Caesars on the Strip, and did that for 5 years. It was great. And then I started working for Barry Manilow actually as a host for a show and a couple different properties on the Strip. So I mean, it was great. I mean, actually, even before I had both my boys, I, it was almost like, from the age of 17 to 30, everything was great. It was amazing. It was great. And so for me to, at 30 years old, after having my second son, have this whole thing where, have this whole almost breakdown, not only of like my past and stuff being released and coming out, but just like physically, I feel physically just broke down and couldn't take it anymore. And at one point my hair was falling out.
Mm.
And that's when I really knew, like, okay, I'm to the point where I'm so stressed out my body is failing.
Yeah.
And so after I did go to the therapy and continue doing all the stuff and kept writing and putting it together, Jesse, I've known Jesse for, I'd probably say 3 years, and we were just hanging out one day, and I happened to show him some of my stuff that I'd written, and he had seen some of the artwork at my place, and he was like, why don't you need to put this all together in a book. And that's so it kind of came about as like a mistake, but a good one.
Yeah, your book's kind of unique, right? It's like you're sharing your story, but you're kind of doing it through art.
Absolutely. And then I'm actually putting journal entries from when I was 17, and how depressed I was, and how I was admitting, like, I'm going to kill myself, at 17, but I had nobody to talk to. So I had to write it down in a journal. And, just seeing stuff like that just makes me know how important it is to just have a, interaction and regular conversations with your children. Because, at 4 and 5, my two boys, I'm regularly talking to them about, how they feel and how they treat others, or if, just having open dialogue. And, if I had maybe had that and felt more comfortable, I would have been able to, reach out to somebody who would have been able to help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting. So from, 17 to 30, you were doing well, and it seems like, you just needed to get out of that situation. I mean, it must have been like
Absolutely.
so freeing just to be on your own, be in a different location.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And at that time, at 18, I actually met somebody, and like, he was the ultimate love of my life, and was a police officer out in Las Vegas. And in we were together for 5 years, and we were engaged to get married. And then in 2009, he passed away.
Mm.
And so my life in Vegas, for the most part, like I said, has been amazing. But that was definitely a time and point where, it was a pretty low point. But luckily, I feel like I've always had a really great support system of friends and family who are around me here. And, I've been able to, overcome so much worse. And so I realize, especially having my two boys, that, life is pretty amazing and it still goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a support system is so important. It's so helpful.
Absolutely.
No matter what you're going through. So then what would you say is kind of like the things that have helped you the most, once you started having the memories and, going through the postpartum depression and just going through some tough times there again, what really helped you to get out of that? I mean, was it the art? Was it other things as well?
I think it was a combination of things. I think definitely, the art was my own personal, intimate expression that I could let out. Definitely writing, just even if it's just jotting something down for the day, just like, if something annoyed you or just something great happened. I mean, just write it out, like let it out. But then also to still be social, because I'm definitely one who can be, I mean, I don't even have internet or a TV at my house. So I'm definitely one who can be antisocial because, you know, I enjoy my alone time, but I know now that I need that time with people who like build me up and who enjoy doing the same things I do, and who just make my life better and I make their lives better. And that's so important because especially having my kids now, to build that family unit and build that network around you in your community. To be able to interact with people, at parks and have kids, and just to meet people in your community who are, amazing and want to give back also.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to kind of push yourself to do these things? Because I can
Ab-
imagine, like, someone in that situation.
Absolutely. I'm a
Yeah.
very I mean I'm very good at interacting with people, but it is very difficult for me to get up the courage to actually like get out of the house sometimes. I have a little bit of anxiety. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just because I'm so, with my job and what I do with painting at home, I am used to kind of being a little secluded, so I can get kind of used to that. Um, so when I actually do prepare to like do stuff or do events and do painting things, I get really and actually even before doing uh this interview with you, I get pretty nerve wracked. But overall, it's like I always know that whatever and whenever I feel like nervous or fearful about something, it's a good thing because that's I'm gonna be pushed to another level of pushing myself
Mm-hmm.
out of my comfort zone, and that's great.
Yeah.
You always want to keep evolving and learning and doing things that challenge you, and so that you can be proud of something. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
you just always got to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I know I read, I think it was in your book, you said, the reason I know that I have to speak out about my journey is because I want to show that no matter what happens to you in your past, it will never determine who you are now. What do you think has allowed you to be able to see things that way?
um, I think I'm pretty lucky that that actually did come from a pretty strict religious household, because I think it gave me a lot of values and a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy and forgiveness. So I feel like after I went through all those therapy, a few years ago, and just in the last few years, I just have a lot more respect for life and just for people. And because I feel like I'm the perfect example for that. You can see me or meet me and not think that like, oh, this person's probably had a great life. And I feel like it's such a easy thing to label people or to judge them, but you have no idea what somebody's going through or what they've been through. So overall, you should just be kind to everybody. And I, the more people that I interact with and that get to know me and then read my book, and to see their reaction of like, oh my God, I would never guess. And you're so different. And, I can't believe that, you've been through this, you know, it makes me, I know that so many other people have the same courage. I have so many friends who've been through traumatic events in their life, and you wouldn't have ever guessed it. And those women are ones that I look up to and that amaze me. So, if I can be that person that people feel comfortable, coming up to and just telling them, I mean, I get it. I get it. Like, it's not easy to be vulnerable and to be honest about things that you've gone through or things that you've been through or going through right now. But it's just, it just, you understand like how much we all actually relate to each other. There's so many things that we've probably all been through that aren't great. We don't want to admit. And, that you may hold a grudge and stuff for, but I just realized in my life. And I think having kids just made me move on to another level of just, you know, kindness and humility. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, being honest with other people and letting the story out. Um, Hopefully people will feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did the postpartum depression last?
You know what? I was diagnosed that, but I definitely think that before I got like help because at first they actually with postpartum, and they also prescribed me as being PTSD from so it's post traumatic stress disorder from from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, when I went into the healthcare clinic, they actually medicated me for a little while, for like, I think a month. And I've never been on anything in my entire life. I've taken vitamins. Like, I'm not somebody to take anything. So, and I got extremely sick on them. And that's actually when I started doing the art instead, and started not, and by consulting my doctor also, to not take medication that, helped with stuff like that, just because I wanted to do it in a natural way. I wanted to like be able to release all this stuff instead of masking it with something,
Mm-hmm.
not allowing my mind to be able to, go through these painful things. Like, it's not crazy to, get upset and cry about stuff that you remember from your past. Like, I don't want to be numb to it.
Mm.
For once, I actually want to deal with it and feel it and go through it and mourn it and forgive myself for it and be able to move on. And yeah, I think. Sorry, I kind of went off my train of thought there.
No.
Like, going on.
No, you know what? I mean, I can so relate to that and respect that, because I'm actually, I've talked about this on the podcast in the past. I'm in the process of getting off of an antidepressant that I've been on for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because
Right.
I want to just kind of, do things naturally.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's not to say that, that's how everybody needs to do it.
No, not at all.
Right, but that's what I want to do for myself, kind of
Yeah.
like you did for
Yeah.
yourself, and I'm finding other ways to deal with, you know, feelings that come up,
Exactly. That's great. Yeah. Just finding out what works for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Art works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Some people garden. Some people, you know what I mean? Something where you can just like have some time to yourself to have an outlet of
Mm-hmm.
some sort.
Yeah.
And we all have our different types of outlet, whether it be exercising or, meeting with friends or, just going for a run or whatever it is. Like, as long as you can find that and find something that, you enjoy and you're passionate about, I feel like, you focus on that, and just when you start to feel that, you really want to, like, you start to really realize what you need to do to take care of yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
you realize that, like, you are only uniquely you, like, and that's freaking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you got to do the best for you. And that's what matters. And that's great. I think that's amazing that you're doing that.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I'll tell you, I mean, I realize now as I'm coming off of it that I have been numb to so many feelings over the years.
Yes.
And it's uncomfortable to experience
Absolutely.
them now, but I think, I rather experience them, and I'd rather
Yeah.
to go through them and to process them than to just be numb to them my entire life,
Yeah. Because I don't want to be like 70 years old and have all these things that I've been holding on to. Like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I'm 34. Like, I just got to let the stuff go. And I just need to get on with life, because life is pretty great. So I just need to, like, move on at some point. And, why not do it now?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So Annie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah, so I haven't. So, last time I was on any type of medication was back in 2014. I think it was like February. Same thing. My doctor had me on. I think it was, a I think it was Zoloft or something like that. But I was getting really bad dizzy spells, and I was actually passing out.
Mm.
So, he agreed that, my body just was pretty much rejecting whatever it was that I was being given. And so that's when I started just taking vitamins and working out and I love doing yoga. My best friend's an instructor, and it's just, I've just something that I really enjoy doing. And of course I still paint and write. And now I've been traveling, actually. I just got back from Peru 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to New York Book Expo in 2 weeks. And it's great. Like, I can't complain. My kids are amazing. I'm basically doing and living, a life that I actually never even dreamed of.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any things that, you still kind of struggle with today?
Of course, I think always self-judgment, I think everybody's always, you can't help it. When you're human, you're going to have insecurities and, self-judgment, and just, you know, I think that's something I'm always going to constantly have to kind of work on, is self-love, and to, like, give myself a break. You know what I mean? I realize now, especially with, working and taking care of two boys and, trying to have a social life still and traveling and, trying to fit it all in one, I realized that, what, I realize I have to constantly take out time for myself to have self-love, whether it be just, you know, sitting in a backyard reading a book for an hour and just not having any distractions or anything bothering me. Um, and I realize that, that's good for me because once I recharge and I have time like that, I'm so much better at everything I do at, being a friend, being a mother, being a daughter, being a sister. I get better and better. So I think that's always a good thing to do for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we don't take the time for ourselves sometimes because we feel like it's selfish or something, or we just,
Absolutely. As a mom, you always feel like, oh, I could do more. I could do more. You know what I mean? And then it's just,
yeah,
but then you're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. And then when you
and you're
get
no
that,
good to anybody.
yeah, exactly. And then when you're that exhausted, you're like resentful and miserable. And it's like, okay, that's just like a downward spiral. So why don't I just be nice to myself and then I'll be happy the rest of the day.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so important to be able to do that. Um, so tell us a little bit more about, what it is that you do today and about your book.
Yes. So I have been actually been a demo artist for a company. It's called Wacom. It's from Vancouver, Washington. They do interactive art tablets, art screens. Actually, I think a lot of the animation companies work and do their artists work on it. But when they travel and do shows and stuff, I've worked for them for the past 10 years demoing art on their screens, and then actually do some like freelance artwork. I've still been painting, and I've been starting writing a second book. So I'm really busy. So I'm excited about Book Expo in 2 weeks because that'll be really fun. I mean, my book came out in February and it did really well on Amazon. I got number one in what category was it? It was group therapy and number two in painting. So it did awesome, and so it was way more than I expected.
Nice.
And so I'm really excited to be at New York. I think I'm going to be there June 1st through the 6th, and I get to see all the other authors who work with lifestyle entrepreneurs. So I'm super excited about that. Especially there's another author named Katie Soy, who we have a really weird, crazy story together.
I've met Katie.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Are you aware of her book? Do you know what her concept and what her book is about?
Her latest book, it's fiction, right?
Yes, it's called The Phoenix Projects. And the crazy thing about me and Katie is that we met a year ago at one of Jesse's events in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, right. She basically, wrote this book and this fiction book and had pitched it to HBO and was going to, possibly get a series from it and stuff like that. I mean, she's just the most amazing writer ever. And we just started talking. But when I noticed when I had walked into the event at the time, I had bright red fire hair. And when I walked in, I remember seeing Katie and her just staring at me. And we started talking, and she was like, "What's your book about?" And I told her what my book and my story was about. And she just looked at me and she was like, "You will not believe what my book is about." And her book, this is just so insane. So her book
Yeah,
is
actually, I'm not too familiar with what her book is about.
Oh, okay. Well, her book is based about a girl named Annie who grew up in Seattle. And
and she didn't know you before she wrote this?
She did not know me. We met at this event. She'd
Oh my
already written a
goodness.
book. I had already written my book. We were just in the final stages of getting everything done with each of our books separately through Jesse. And when I met her and she had told me this, and she just, I mean, it's so shocking because I've, read her book and the details of stuff, I'm like, it's on point it's like my life.
What? That's crazy.
It is the weirdest. There's no way to describe it. It is the creepiest, weirdest thing I've ever. And people who know me, like Jesse, and know my story, and know everything, when he read her book, also, I mean, it's just, I don't even know how to describe it. There's no.
Wow,
It's just
that's
bizarre.
crazy.
It is absolutely bizarre. And same thing. She's an Asian girl. I mean, and she has red hair. That's why it's called the Phoenix Projects, because Annie has bright red hair. So that's why when she saw me walk in the room, she was like, "Oh my God, this is just weird."
Oh my God, what was her reaction when she found out about your story?
I mean, like mine. We both were just floored. We were just in shock. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Like, I just feel like this is just the weirdest thing ever. I don't know how to describe it other than that.
Wow.
Like absolute meant to be moment, but very bizarre that somebody I've never met and is publishing through the same author, basically my story of what I went through in Seattle.
Wow.
And all this trauma
crazy.
and sexual abuse and these things, and hers is about sex trafficking. And so it's just, it's insane. It's crazy. I recommend her book highly. It's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, I'll link it up in the show notes as well. I guess that's just one of those things you can't explain.
Yes, I know. I know. I'm like, wow, I don't even know how to explain it. If it didn't happen to me, I would think that like somebody was lying. Like,
Right.
This has just got to be a joke because this is just so weird.
Wow. So you said that you're working on a second book. Are you able to tell us anything about it?
Yeah, so it's gonna have, of course, artwork in it, and kind of similar to my first book, where it's gonna have my journalings, but it's actually just like the past 12 months of journaling. So it's really kind of my traveling that I've been doing the last year, the people I've met, the experiences I've gone through now, and the artwork while doing it. So it's called this is like a working title, but I think it's going to be called Me, My Girlfriends, and Finding a God.
Cool. Any idea when it might be out?
I'm almost done with it, so I don't know. I wasn't really, I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about this one. This one might just be like a private book that I share with really close friends. And I mean, I'm still thinking about it. I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Annie, I want to ask you the final question that I have for you today.
Yeah.
And that is, given what you know now, if you could go back to when you were going through your tough times and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
It always gets better. Like, no matter what you go through, it's so temporary. It always gets better. So just don't give up. Like, suicide or, just that's never a answer for anything. It might be it might be a relief for you, but I realized, coming from a family where there's been a lot of abuse and depression and suicide, that the only people that, end up being hurt are your friends and family, because you might have relief, but they will never. So my advice to myself would definitely be, just never give up. It always gets better. Just everything's so temporary. We're just really lucky to even be here and to be healthy and to have people who care about us and to be able to, hopefully, have a home and have somewhere to sleep and have something to eat. We're really, really fortunate people. And sometimes we forget that. And, like I said, I was just in Peru 3 weeks ago, and it's just a beautiful place. And people there are so humble, and a lot of them don't have a lot. And you don't really realize that because we kind of stay in our little bubble, or, wherever you may live, that, you have a car, you have, things come easy sometimes.
Things you take for granted.
Yeah, clean water. You have, working plumbing, it's stuff you don't think about that other people in other places deal with. And but they're just the nicest, happiest people. And I feel like, having a simpler life is so much better. That way of living is amazing. And so I really see how beautiful life is, and how, how kind I want to be to everybody I am ever interact with.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, things do get better over time. And I know it's hard. I mean, you and I both know, what it's like to be in such dark places and to feel hopeless, to feel that despair. But, if you hang in there, it can get better. And the worst thing is, to give up and never know what might have been. And that's why I love to bring people like you on, Annie, to share your stories and to give people hope for things to get better.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. And before I let you go, what's the best way for people to connect with you or find out more about what you have going on?
Oh, yeah. So they can go to I have a website called herart.gallery, and it's HER dash ART.gallery. And you can check out my art, and I have some of my travel stuff on there, and you can go to my Instagram, and like I said, my next stop's New York, and I'm hoping to do. I vowed at the beginning of the year this year because I've never really traveled that much. I went out of the country for the first time, to Europe in September, and then I went. Anyways, the beginning of this year for my New Year's resolution was every month to go somewhere cool and different, or to meet new people, and just be able to have life experience and enjoy this world. So I've been doing that now. So and I think next is like Austin, and then hopefully Japan and Australia. So I have a pretty crazy schedule.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
So yeah, it's all good fun stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, thank you again for coming on and for sharing your story. And I think it's really just it's full of hope, and I hope that I hope that those listening, are able to feel a little more hope for their situations.
Yes, I hope so too.
All right. Well, I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thanks for listening to the show today. This has been the Grass Gets Greener podcast, episode 109. Go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/Annie Kim to find the links mentioned during this episode or to leave a comment. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and found Annie's story inspiring. I just want to reiterate what we were talking about at the end about how things can get better. I know it doesn't feel like that when things are not good and you're struggling with the after effects of what you've been through, but I also know that things can turn around much quicker than you might think. If you're in that situation right now, please hang in there. You too can have a life that you maybe can't even imagine right now. That's not something that has to only happen for certain people. It can happen for anyone. So don't lose hope for that for yourself. Let the stories you hear on here guide you in your journey. You are not alone. I also wanted to mention something because this didn't get mentioned in the episode, but a portion of the proceeds from Annie's book and her art go to local charities in her area, so I just wanted to pass that along in case you're interested in supporting that. And come back in 2 weeks for the next episode. And also, I've been working on a free resource that will have all of the tools and strategies that my guests have used in their healing journeys compiled into a list of the most common ones so that you can have that at your fingertips and be able to start using them for yourself if you're not already. Like I said, you're not alone. We've got your back. So I'm hoping that will be ready by the next episode. So be on the lookout for that. And lastly, don't forget to head over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave the show a rating and review so that we can reach as many survivors as possible. And as always, have hope.